Ricky, sounds like you got your TV on in the background.
Okay. All right. Let me.
All right. All right. So I want to go ahead and take the time out to go ahead and get everything commenced. Thank you so much for everybody to be here for this virtual town hall meeting today. I just want to let everybody who's viewing know who is all going to be speaking today. So I want to give like a little overview. So we have, of course, Shaun Smith right here. Shaun Smith is the president and founder of Black Push. He has worked tirelessly to help people who have been incarcerated have a second chance. He has worked with a lot of different other nonprofit organizations, such as the Powerhouse Enrichment Center, which is working right now to get housing for persons who have been incarcerated and help them get a start again. And then we have, of course, State Representative Park Cannon. Park Cannon is one of the fourth openly gay representatives in Georgia. That's awesome. She has worked tirelessly to fight for women's rights and to fight for healthcare rights and for gay rights as well. And then, of course, we have Pastor Jamal Bryant. Of course, he doesn't need an introduction, but again, I'm gonna give him one. Thank you so much for being on the call. He works for New Birth in Lithonia, Georgia. And then we have, of course, Congressman Kwanzaa, who, of course, needs no introduction. He currently he's sitting in John Lewis' seat, which is so awesome. He did an amazing job in his time there. And then we have Bishop Ramon Belton. He is the VP of the Pastors Alliance for Cobb County. And then we have Mr. Ricky Brown. Of course, Ricky Brown has a success story in himself. He has did so much, and he, of course, also has been somebody who has been incarcerated before. So yeah, so I want to go ahead and commence everything. So we're going to talk about criminal reform, voter suppression, healthcare, and we're going to talk about the Georgia hate crime bill. I want to go ahead and talk a little bit about that. If we can, with Ms. Park Cannon, can we kind of touch a little bit over the hate crime bill and why do you think it's important a little bit that you feel like the viewers should understand and know a little bit about? Ms. Cannon? Got you. Okay. All right, so we're going to kind of move a little bit. Mr. Kwanzaa, do you know a little bit about the hate crime bill that was passed by our governor? Okay.
Just 1 second, everyone. How y'all doing?
We're doing great. We're doing great. Thank you.
That I had to run out to the car. One of my phones was in the car, and I need it for part of this process. Sorry about that. Hey, thank y'all for having me. First of all, I apologize. This is a great moment in time. Of course, I'm completing Congressman Lewis's term. One of my good friends years ago began the hate crimes conversation, Senator Vincent Ford. He has always fought for that. And, finally, it seems like the state of Georgia, and I haven't been intimately involved in much of the state politics over the last couple of years, haven't been in any politics, frankly, in the last few years since I ran for mayor until I just ran for Congress. But it seems like it's a milestone for it to actually get passed under a Republican administration when the conversation actually started under Democrats. So, I'm a Democrat, but a lot of times it's amazing in America that the things that are done to help people, communities of color, Black community, African Americans, doesn't always happen with the people who say they're our friends, So this just happened to come in this particular time. Maybe they needed it as a measure to balance off their politics, but to see a bill that steps up and tries to protect all citizens and doesn't allow people to be castigated, attacked, verbally or physically because of their choice of lifestyle, orientation, gender, or race is a phenomenal thing. It has passed in other parts of the country. Georgia has been lagging behind, but we're the home of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the conscience of the Congress, Congressman Lewis, and so many other people have been fighting for this to happen. And it's even, been a national move, but we were behind on it. So I'm just thankful that we have people like Park Cannon and others who fought the fight and kept it going, and have ensured that it got over the finish line, because really Vincent Fort was the loudest voice in the room, but probably just because he was so loud, people didn't want to see it pass, even though it was the right thing to do. So politics sometimes is put over people, but in this case, the people won, and just thankful to know that it happened.
Great, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. And now that we have Ms. Park Cannon here, I definitely would like to hear her views on this as well. We're discussing the hate crime bill.
Good evening, everyone. It is so interesting to think that when Ahmaud Arbery's life was taken this summer, that we were actually able to step into the state capitol with his family members by our side and help get that piece of legislation passed. What I will say, though, was that the same trickeries were happening. The members of the majority were saying that they were so thrilled about this, but they couldn't even recite Dr. King's mountaintop speech correctly. They were misquoting and just really more excited about a moment of press. And I want to share my experience on the day that the hate crime bill passed, because as one of my colleagues would say, Representative Abel Mabel Thomas, if you don't share your story, then no one else will. That day that we were going to vote on the hate crime bill was the same day that Rayshard Brooks's funeral was taking place. Rayshard Brooks is a 27-year-old individual, of course, here in Atlanta, Georgia, who was just a father who really should have gotten a ride home that evening, either by the escort by the police or maybe by a community member. But his funeral was taking place at the time that the hate crime bill was being called up. Myself and my colleague, Representative Erica Thomas, we were at his funeral at historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, the church where I rejoice and enjoy these interesting political moments from a religious perspective. We were told that the hate crime bill was about to be voted on. So we quickly left from the middle of his funeral and went back to the state capitol. When we got to the state capitol, instead we were met by a full line of police officers, Capitol police officers, who were outside of the House chamber. Instead of calling up the hate crime bill, they called up 848, which was the police immunity bill. What it did was it called for the ability for officers on duty to open civil cases against protesters. Once they had that bill go through and the votes come in, then they called up the hate crime bill. So what we know is that this fight, even in the moment in which it is passing, and is historic for families deserving racial justice, for the LGBTQ community, it includes status recognition for many individuals who have experienced hate just because they're gay or transgender, as well as those from just different minority groups. It was not without much turmoil in the moment of the bill passing that we just have to stay woke. We just have to be honest in the moment and say that there is so much work to be done. So I'm really proud to see and to say that now the bill is going towards implementation. It is not yet implemented in the state of Georgia yet, though. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation reported to me about a month ago that it will take them 6 months to get the tracking software updated in their organization. So I am waiting to see when that database is ready. It is a replicate of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's platform and database for these issues of hate. And what we saw out of Georgia from 2019, FBI hate statistics, was an increase in reporting, which is really important because it means that once we get the system in place in Georgia, that people will use it. So I thank you for first just hearing my story about how the hate crime bill really got passed on that day in June 2020.
Again, thank you so much for that. It was very enlightening, and it gave a lot to the scope of the hate crime bill. And you know, for our viewers who are a little bit, who did not know much on it, it really helped them understand exactly and help them digest what that bill was. I want to take some time to see if anybody else wanted to add some commentary to this. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and move to the next topic. It's going to be healthcare. Is right now we are in a pandemic. COVID-19 has done a bad number to a lot of Americans and this people in general. So the need for healthcare is especially needed now. So I want to take some time out to speak to you a little bit about healthcare and maternity mortality rates, and what can we do? How can we grow to get more access to healthcare for Americans and what have you? And how can we better the mortality rates for pregnant women who, of course, pass during birth? I'm gonna open the floor. Want to open the floor and Mr.
I
Kwanzaa
want to
Hall.
jump in here.
Yeah, let's
Who
do it.
wants to go first?
You want to go ahead? Let's do it, Miss Cannon. If you want to jump in there, let's do it.
Don't get me started, but get me started.
Let's do it.
This issue, it really deserves an understanding that we have a long way to go. There has been legislation that has been passed, but really what we need is culture change. And that culture change comes in the version of sensitivity training, bias training, as well as resources and finances. Here in the state of Georgia, we have been battling with Alabama and Mississippi for the worst rate of people who are pregnant dying when trying to give birth. That can either mean that they have actually already given birth, or that can mean that they are in the process of delivering that child. That can be someone who might have pre-existing conditions or someone who has never had a pre-existing condition in their life and was seen to be very healthy. I'm really proud to be a labor doula, which is someone who is an emotional and physical support person for people when they are going through the childbirth experience. Here in Georgia, I have been providing doula services all through COVID-19 in the hospitals as well as in home birth. And unfortunately, the laws just don't stack up to allow for community care workers to be compensated or to provide the care that is necessary. So what we're hopeful for as we go forward in this conversation is not just that the House of Representatives in Georgia will only give 6 months of Medicaid care, as we call Mama Medicaid, postpartum, but that they will give a full year. We, myself, Representative Renita Shannon, and myself, we posed a piece of legislation last year that said, give 1 full year postpartum of care for Medicaid mamas. That would cost $40 million, which is a drop in the bucket when your state budget is $27 billion. We instead were not given $40 million. We were given $19 million, which is 6 months. And so right now, if someone has given birth since July, they are still included because it is right up until that 6 months implementation period. But we're very concerned about what happens in January when those individuals who are giving birth, and what about 6 months after that? So we have already started working with coalitions like Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies, Planned Parenthood, and many of the hospital systems to dig into this issue and to put more money towards the individuals who figure out what really happened to that person. Was it a car accident? Was it high blood pressure? Was it pre-existing conditions? Was it violence in the homes? And those individuals are called abstractors. So we look forward to working with any individuals, faith communities, as well as elected officials to get these real-time stories about what maternal mortality means in Georgia. Thank you
Awesome.
again.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your commentary on that. Okay, so we're gonna, Bishop Ramon, do you have any commentary on the healthcare access?
Yes, it's a subject. Definitely, I have two daughters right now who are pregnant, and that are dealing with that. Are due in April. Both of them are due in April, and I tell you, I've been doing a lot on it. Because I'm a chaplain in one of the hospitals in Cobb County, so I do my best to get to know these doctors and what's going on and the things that's available to them, because you never know if your child can get put in that position, and you need to know what to expect and what to prepare for. And, we have the Cobb Pastors Alliance, which is a bunch of pastors in Cobb County, which I'm the vice president of it. And we started that group in the beginning of the pandemic due to make sure these things that we're talking about, the healthcare reform and things, to know who we need to get connected to and this and that, to find out what's going on and what's available for these young ladies during that, as State Representative said. So it's so important for us to get informed and to get out there and get involved to know what's going on. And we're holding people accountable because, we need to know. And it don't need to be a thing that, okay, it went, what happened? No, we need to know. And especially with my two daughters pregnant right now, it's so important to me to know what's available to them, what's going to happen to them, and what they're doing to them, what type of treatment they're getting. Yes, we're very involved as a Cobb Pastors Alliance in that. We do a lot with all the Cobb Wellstar hospitals. So I'm very, very informed, as basically pretty much a lot what she said is what my daughters have found out.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your input on that.
If I could echo as well, there's at least three measures that passed Congress since I've been here. One is HR House Resolution 8196, which protects Black Women and Girls Act by Representative Kelly from Illinois, and establishes an interagency task force to examine the conditions and experiences that affect Black women and girls in education across the board: economic development, healthcare, labor, employment. And then, as Representative Cannon mentioned, there's a House resolution that we just voted on, 1897, the Mamas Act, and it provides federal funds. At least it's HR 1897, but I have looked at it and it looks like we've got about at least 30 million, maybe a little more, in grant funds that speak to different areas where the disparities are greatest. Of course, we know the largest disparity is in communities of color amongst Black women. I was on the board of Wellstar on formerly Atlanta Medical Center on Boulevard, and we were looking to create a center focused on doulas and providing some advanced training and support for the young women who live in the Bedford Pines community, where the average income is about $3,000 a year. Average rent is $12 a month. Greatest concentration of poverty in the Southeast United States, and to turn it into a place of innovation around women's health and attacking maternal mortality directly where it could exist. And if we could create a model there, we would cause it to be something that we could share with the rest of the world. And then there's one other one, House Resolution 6317, which ensures coverage in public health emergencies. It's by Representative Doggett, and this is another one I supported. And it provides for special enrollment periods during this pandemic and any other emergencies to allow people that special case situation, which, as you can imagine, many healthcare providers are trying to get around this. They don't want to have to provide this because it's an additional cost. So leave your enrollment windows open longer. People weren't even aware of their windows closing in some cases. So there's a couple of measures on the table. We can send them back with the full links to all the details that y'all can share with your respective networks.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Kwanzaa Hall. I really appreciate your input on that. I want to ask Mr. Bryant his input on the healthcare conversation at hand.
Thank you. Good evening to all of you. I'm grateful, regrettably, as a pastor, I have to serve really as the epicenter for funerals over this pandemic. And to the extent I had a hiring freeze at the beginning of the pandemic, and I've had to hire 2 additional ministers just to oversee funerals. And so I'm seeing the healthcare crisis from a different perspective. I want to interject, Mr. Montgomery, that when we're talking about health, not just physicality, but there's got to be a line item around mental health in our community. Depression is skyrocketing. Anxiety is skyrocketing. We've got a great number of teenagers who are cutting themselves and who are finding a greater surge in chemical codependency. And so there's got to be a holistic approach to what it is that we navigate around the health crisis in our community. Malcolm X said, when white America catches a cold, Black America catches pneumonia. Well, we got bird flu right through here. And so the sheets have been pulled back when you see the inequitable numbers around our community and COVID-19, and they back themselves up into the food deserts. It backs itself up to many young people who are not eating because they're doing virtual learning and their one sure meal was at the school. So there's several different facets that we're going to have to tackle as we move forward in this crisis.
Thank you so much for that, Pastor Bryant. And then I want to ask Mr. Smith his opinion on this, and then we're going to move to criminal reform.
Yes, I mean, I have a difference with me. I share everybody's view here. I myself personally, man, I've had 8 surgeries in 3 years. Started off with the cab. I just most recently I'm 33 years old. Most recently had my whole colon removed in June. Prior to having my colon removed, I got delayed twice for surgery because I was a victim of COVID, and I had to quarantine over 50 days or over 30 days in order for me to have surgery. Went into the hospital, literally COVID free. 2 weeks in, I had problems with my surgery, almost passed away. And they tested me because I got really sick, and I came back positive for COVID again for a second time. So I ended up being out on FMLA for about 12 weeks. And when I returned back from my job, immediately after I gave them my paperwork stating that I was clear to come back, they terminated my employment. And when they terminated my employment, because I was the only employee that had the insurance plan was terminated to me from COBRA as well. So, I mean, I look at it from a perspective that, everybody should have the right to healthcare. I don't care whether it's from a mental standpoint, because when my grandmother passed away, I took counseling, and I'm a minister as well. I passed a church over in Dallas, and I took counseling. That was one of the things I needed in order to help get me over that stump. We deal, as Pastor Bryant mentioned, man, we deal with people every single day, young people, old people, who deal with depression, who deal with low self-esteem. And these are things that have to be addressed within the medical system itself. Even from a perspective where your employer can let you go, or your employer can easily, man, snatch away your health care, and then you don't have access to it because you made too much over a certain amount of time. And even though you've lost your insurance in the moment, you've made too much and you don't even have access to health care. It's one of the things that should not be an option. It should be a right to everybody, every single citizen of this country. And that's one of the things that we here at Black Push, we continue to fight for, because everyone should have the right to health care. And even as we cross over into criminal justice reform, one of the things we have to also look at too, and let's be honest, I'm an ex-offender, but I know we have somebody else on here who's ex-offender as well, is the healthcare system in the system. It's not a good healthcare system. We have plenty of people who are dying because they're not taking care of them and not offering the healthcare that they need. People complain about sick and they ignore it like it's nothing. I remember one time in particular, I was incarcerated and I literally fell off my bunk, and all they did was put me in the isolation room and told me to put ice on it and it's gonna be okay. Did not check me to see if I had a head injury, did not check me to see if I had broken a bone, nothing like that. So we have to, when we talk about healthcare, it's not only something that people who are out and free should have the right to. Everybody needs to have the same right to the same equal opportunity health insurance. One of the things that really threw me is I have a friend who works for the state of Florida, and she works for a senator in the state of Florida. And I asked her one day, I said, how much do you pay for health insurance? And she told me $1. $1 she pays for health insurance. And got a good paying job, not struggling, you know, $1. We got to make sure that we offer that opportunity to everybody to have the right to health care.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Smith. I want to move the discussion a little bit to criminal reform. I'm going to ask Congressman Kwanzaa to talk a little bit about criminal reform.
Yes, thank you so much. And Shaun, I do feel your pain. I've had a lot of friends who are incarcerated. I grew up with, and I didn't get a chance to introduce legislation, but I did put on the record a measure that would speak to federal, because people say they want to deal with folks who are incarcerated and help, but they never do. And so I put something on the record to speak to the Metro Atlanta jails, which many of them now have Black sheriffs. We have a sheriff in Fulton County, DeKalb County, Clayton County, Cobb County, and Gwinnett.
Just elected a Black sheriff.
Right? And then one down south of Henry. So we need to let this be a model for how we take it in a different direction. I'll share back what I introduced, but I'll just run down the list of justice reform measures because I do have to get off in a second. We've got House Resolution 8941. It's a voting rights measure, but it speaks to securing federal voting rights for persons when released from incarceration. As you know, just because you're released, you don't get the right to go right and vote. We need to remove that problem area, because sometimes people don't even know they can vote, and they've been pushed out of the system. So we got to fix that. Another one is House Resolution 8979, which is to amend the revised statutes of the United States to eliminate qualified immunity for officers and police departments. The other one was House Resolution 8980, which would provide for the resentencing and expungement of nonviolent offenses for individuals adversely impacted by the war on drugs. But so that one that was in the MORE Act only deals with federal. What this measure does is it calls for any state and local government that receives federal funds to expunge every record for someone, nonviolent offenders impacted by the war on drugs. So that could be like 2 to 3 million people. That would be a real impact as opposed to 2,000 or 3,000 people. I'm talking about we really need to bring restorative justice with the financial component to it. The other one, there's only one other one, and it was House Resolution 106, which was proposing for an amendment to the Constitution to prohibit the use of slavery and involuntary servitude as punishment for a crime. So that means in jails, we know that many people are working for pennies a day, so to speak. This would remove that practice so that you're not doing forced labor, involuntary slavery in jails, because basically many individuals who are incarcerated, especially in some of the tougher prisons or even county jails, are feeling the pain of basically being a slave for 10, 20 years of their lives. And that's just not right. So those are things I put on the plate. I put 4 measures that speak to justice reform that I supported. And then, of course, the MORE Act. I supported the reparations, HR 40, which would have a study and reparation proposals for African Americans, sponsored by Sheila Jackson Lee. And then I think it was one other one, of course, the George Floyd Enforcement Trust and Integrity Act, which is House Resolution 7100, and then the Eric Garner Excessive Use of Force Protection Act, which is by Jeffries from New York, and it prohibits chokeholds. So we got a whole suite of measures that I brought some. There's some that were already moving. So that conversation, we need to make it loud in these first 100 days of this administration and not let up, because they both have had some hand in justice not being on our side. So we need to make sure that we hold everyone accountable, and not being mean or anything, but South Carolina wanted for Biden, right? Black people want it in Georgia and want it in other places. We need to be treated fairly. We need to get our get back on this one, and this is the one to ask for. And I just want everybody to know, put the word out. Pastor, I know, appreciate you and all that you do at the great work you're doing over there. You've been doing justice reform for a long time, even before you came to Atlanta. Know your work and know many people who are good friends of yours. So I just think we got to raise the voice up while we had a window, because if you wait till 2 years from now, it won't happen. So we got to make it happen now. So I'll share this with y'all, and y'all can take a look and share it with your friends and get it out to your networks as well.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that, Congressman. We really appreciate your contributions and all that you do in justice and criminal justice reform is such an important topic that tends to go. It needs so much work. Thank you so much for all that you do. I want to go ahead and
Thanks for having me.
ask. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for clearing your schedule to be a part of this. Mr. Ricky Brown, I would like to your opinion. I know that you have, experience with this. I want to, get your opinion, your input on criminal justice reform.
Well, good evening, everybody. First of all, I'd like to say I'm honored to, first of all, be a part of Congressman Kwanzaa Hall's office and his fight for criminal justice reform. As many of you know, I'm an ex-offender myself. I served 13 years in federal prison off of a 15-year sentence, and I came home and I just couldn't get a job. So I created my own job, hiring people like me. And I've taken that opportunity to give people an opportunity to be productive members of society. And work of Congressman Hall has been really inspiring to me. We go way back when it comes to criminal justice reform. We go all the way back to ban the box. Kwanzaa can tell you about that. When we banned the box in the city of Atlanta, because a lot of people had problems getting a job because of that box being on their record. And then when I listened to Congressman Hall talk about federal prison, I served 13 years in federal prison. 2 years of that was in the hole in Leavenworth. I was caught up in the war on drugs back in the 1990s. When we think about that war on drugs, locked up over 3 million people like me. We only had over 800,000 slaves in 1860. So I think that law kind of took us back. I think that law kind of took us back over 400 years. And to see a lot of this come to fruition now, where people are really taking an opportunity to look at criminal justice reform and look at people like myself and realize that we are still somebody's child. We're still somebody's father. We deserve an opportunity to have criminal justice reform. When we go back to federal prison, I worked in the same factory that Congressman Hall talked about. I worked in what they call Newbie Corp. I worked in that factory for 10 years. I worked in that factory for 80 cents an hour. Still, I had to come home. I had to get commissary. I had to use the phone. So I really still didn't come home with any money. So I had to come home and start my life over. And doing that, I saw an opportunity to help others like me. And working with Congressman Hall and with criminal justice reform, man, I'm looking forward to it's helping many people. As you know, my company started it 10 years ago, helping ex-offenders, hiring ex-offenders. We helped build a new Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So we got to go back to the Peel Grants. We go back to the Peel Grants was taken out in the early 90s. So a lot of men and women, they came out like they went in. They come to my office every day, not even able to get a job because they don't have a skill. A lot of them don't have GEDs. So we're going to have to take an opportunity to realize when we talk about mental health, that's going to have to be looked at as well. When we talk about the military, they get an opportunity to get services when they come home. This separation anxiety, it happens. And it's happening every day. Once we come home, does not mean that it's over. We still have things that we have to deal with. Can't get a job, can't get a place to live. So those things are going to have to be changed. I'm excited about the direction that Congressman Hall is doing and direction that people on this panel is doing because there are plenty of Rickies out there, and I'm looking forward to helping a lot of them.
Thank you so much for your input, Mr. Brown. And your story is such a success story. I want to ask State Representative Cannon her input on criminal reform.
We are so blessed in the state of Georgia to look around and realize that a budget tells you exactly what a state government wants to do. And we have had the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus, the nation's largest Black caucus, taking a look at our state budget. We still put so much money in our private prison industry, additionally in our Department of Corrections. But when we look at the healthcare industry and we look at the behavioral health and we look at mental health and disabilities, we don't put that money there. So we actually have created a Justice for All legislative platform between the Black Caucus and the Democratic Caucus. We will be continuing that work underneath the leadership of Leader James Beverly, who is our new leader. He was just elected about 2 months ago. Because these elections, we lost the leader of the Democratic Caucus. He was the most vulnerable person in the state house, and those campaigns work. So we're proud to be, like, Congressman Hall said, the state that flipped, and Black people, we know that we're standing up and that our voice matters. But when it turns to actually looking for the nonprofits that will provide the shelter for those who are coming out of the system, it's been quite difficult. Our office ourselves have just been straight up paying people to get different skills, trade skills at different businesses around District 58 on Metropolitan Parkway, just so that we can start to get the inside information on how difficult it really is. But we are pretty excited about the fact that the Southern Center for Human Rights has been working really diligently on some legislative measures from a bipartisan perspective. Many folks who know me, I am not that girl who plays the bipartisan game. I really do believe that the work needs to center the people, and it needs to have the people's agenda first and foremost. So while the Southern Center is working on those bipartisan measures and seeing what committees they get through, we have created an organization called the People's Uprising. You can find it at thepeoplesuprising.com, and it is specifically a group of elected officials, business leaders, community execs who are working to say, why do they always frame it as a riot, a protest? Isn't it just an uprising? And what is the uprising evoked by? Well, oppression. So we strategically work to deal with these oppressions, and our frontline leaders, we call them y'all, the Young Atlanta Leaders. The y'all members are out there. They have been on the front lines helping us get billboards for Rayshard Brooks and Jamarian Robinson, but also holding these government officials accountable. So legislative session here in Georgia starts on January 11th. It'll be a little bit difficult for the public to see in person, but we are requesting, as the People's Uprising, that you tune in online, you use the live stream functions. There's a new website. The County Commissioner, Natalie Hall, serves on our People's Uprising as well, and has been very close in the past to the work of Congressman Kwanzaa Hall. So we will continue the work there with specifically House Bill 636. It's a bill that tracks excessive use of force. And because we know that there are differences between criminal justice reform and police reform and prison reform, we have to do all of those simultaneously, and hope that the People's Uprising on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is a place where we can work together.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for your input on that one. So I want to ask Pastor Bryant his input on the topic at hand.
Let me thank our state representative, who's doing an incredible job. I'm just mesmerized and impressed, not just by her tenacity, but by her commitment. This is a real hour of reevaluation. Dr. King said something so critical, Terrence. Here's what Dr. King said, that crime is the bride of poverty, that wherever you see poverty, crime is close by. Mahatma Gandhi said this, the highest form of violence is poverty. If that's true, let's look at the battering abuse that is happening to our people, and really the offshoot that has come out from it. And so we really don't have a crime issue as much as we have a poverty issue. Pastoring in DeKalb County, there are so many who don't have access to jobs. And what people are not realizing is that what the COVID is creating is an environment for entrepreneurship. And in that spirit of entrepreneurship, our problem is giving redress to these banking institutions that will only give our constituents, residents, and community members access to capital for used cars, but not capital to start businesses and to buy homes. When it is that they're pulling the branches out of the Black community and just dropping ATMs. If you drive around DeKalb, drive around Folk, you can't find a bank if there was a gun to your head. Even if there's a branch, it ain't open. They keep telling you go that way. And so while we're right now on the last breath of Kwanzaa, to really re-examine community economics, what that means for us. That in the Asian community, their dollar circulates 24 times before it leaves. In the Jewish community, it's 19 times before it leaves. In the Caucasian community, 12 times before it leaves. But for Black people, as soon as we get that $600, it's only gonna stay in our hands for 30 minutes because we're gonna be running to Phipps and Lennox and say, please take our money. We don't want this, please. And so we've got a responsibility to really do some hardcore financial literacy. We've got to talk about how it is that we do community development. For all of our viewers, you've got to watch a documentary called Nailed It. Nailed It. It is a documentary on how the Filipino community came to America. You ain't gonna believe it, Terrence, and says the only thing we're gonna focus on is doing nails. So they rented apartments, put 4 families in an apartment, and made a commitment. We gonna push one family out at a time. Here's what's crazy, State Representative Cannon. We gonna push one person out the apartment at a time. And then as soon as we put a family out, we gonna send for another family in the Philippines because they were thinking with diasporic thought. Our responsibility has got to get past Mr. Jones's ice is colder and figure out how do we get our own ice tray. How it is that we sell slushies in a snow cold machine. And so in this pandemic, while Negroes are high-fiving over 600, we got to figure out how then do we maximize it? Because I don't want us, Terrence, to have a memory lapse. Back in June, everybody was in the juju, giving their $500 away, trying to get 10,000 back in 3 weeks, and then they just all disappeared and flatlined. So we know how to do community investment and development, but it's only for short term. We got to figure out how do we do it as long term. Then let me fall on the cross and say the Black church has blood dripping off its hands if the Black church only talks about the economy when we're asking for the tithe. Our responsibility is not just to ask for the 10%, but to show people how do you maximize your 90%, so that the only person who's flourishing can't just be the pastor and the head of the deacon board and the co-chair of the trustees. But there's got to be something where the Bible says the oil flows from the head and goes down to the skirts of the robe. And so this real economic development is, I'm not waiting on President-elect Biden or Vice President Harris or whether to see Reverend Warnock gonna make it on Tuesday. I'm praying he is, or also, but what is it that we're gonna do in the trenches to say small stuff? I mean, small stuff. In the spring, I'm only hiring Black teenagers to do my lawn. That we got to figure out for these Black businesses is a mandate. We're not just looking for the homeboy hookup, but how many of your Black businesses are going to take, here's the news flash, these college students who are home for internships so that they're not waiting around trying to figure out where they're going to go. We got to figure out what we're going to do. If Morris Brown is now a stone's throw away from accreditation, what do we do to incubate them and then to say to Morris Brown, hey, the whole world has changed. Maybe y'all shouldn't even look at doing a campus. It ought to be all distance learning. Because I got to tell this panel, I am shuddered to figure out that Phoenix University for the last 5 years, Phoenix University, hear this family, Phoenix University for the last 5 years has graduated more Black students than all HBCUs combined. So we got to recalibrate what we're doing and how it is that we move forward to real have economic, not feel good moments, but talk about buying back the block, not buying out the bar.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Pastor Bryant. Thank you so much for your input on that one. I'm going to ask the opinions of Bishop Ramon and then Shaun Smith, and then we're going to move along to voter suppression for the sake of time. So if you will, Bishop, thank you so much.
Amen. Well, I just want to say, first of all, to get up to and say thank you so much for blessing me to be a part of this, us and the Pastors Alliance out of Cobb County. I definitely got a lot of great information thus far from the state representative and Congressman and Ricky Brown and Pastor Bryant and everybody to take back to the Alliance. Dealing with the criminal reform, the Cobb Pastors Alliance, this is a big one for us right here. Cobb County, as you know, was a long time due for a turn. It was a red county for a long time. And of course, now it's taking a turn to the blue. And there's a big transition going on because us pastors, we made a decision not just to get out of the churches. And I pray for all pastors to get out the church and we become a part personally with the police department to where we got to the point where we went down there hand in hand to we communicated back with them. We did a Faith in Blue in October, where we walked with them, the community and the police. And what we've come to the place, we have Sheriff Craig Owens in now, one of the first Black sheriffs. And Lord's willing, we're looking to have our first Black chief soon as well for Cobb County that's coming up here. There's a big shift going place, but the criminal reform is definitely needed because even in Cobb County alone, there's a lot of folks been locked up for a lot of simple misdemeanors for years. I mean, little simple marijuana charges and all. They've been given 20 years for it. And I know a lot of them. And so, thank God that we have Craig Owens in there. And that's one of the biggest things that he's looking to change is to go in there and break some of those things because they was targeting a lot of folks. They was targeting a lot of Spanish and they was targeting, and as Pastor Bryant said, he said a big one with ATM. As many of you know in Cobb County, you got the Six Flags Drive area, the Riverside Parkway. There's not one bank in the area. You got to go to Floyd Road to get the Bank of America, more to the Smyrna area. But like he said, you have an ATM dropped in there and off-brand ATM and this and that for them to go withdraw their money and charge them and make good money, but they don't have a bank. They don't have the actual necessities that they need for their everyday life to help them to feel the value of their lives.
Absolutely.
And so, with this criminal reform, it's so important for us with the Cobb Pastor Line. We formed this big group of pastors in the whole county to where we are holding the Cobb County Police and the sheriff accountable to make a change in the criminal reform.
Thank you so much for that, Bishop. And then and then again, let me reiterate that. Thank you so much, Bishop. And thank you so much so far for everybody who spoke on the topic. I think that what you guys do is monumental in the fight for criminal reform. For the last 2 minutes, I want to ask Mr. Smith his opinions on criminal reform, and then we're going to move to the last thing, voter suppression.
One of the things too, I found interesting, we started off talking about the Georgia hate crime bill, but I think that we forget to mention on the same day that Governor Kemp signed the Georgia hate crime bill went into place, they also voted on a bill called House Bill 838. Simple terms, the bill passed, allowed legal protection to police officers and first responders, right? We as a community, and Pastor Bryant said it so beautifully when he said that the church has blood on his hands for this issue. We have not stood up for this issue the way we need to. One of the things that is even more important, during COVID time, we had a lot of Black businesses that went out and failed because of the fact that they banked that these big banks and thought that these big banks were going to protect them. And then when it came down to them needing PPP or any kind of loan, those big banks failed them. And what it did is that it shifted my perspective. And I got with another friend of mine and we started a company called Newbie Corp, which you work for, Trinice, as well. We started a company called Newbie Corp, designed around the fact of helping bringing Black businesses together, bringing our Black dollar back into our community. It is so powerful that we don't understand. And I mean, Pastor Bryant, man, he expounded on this beautifully. Like most of the time when they want money to move into the community, where do they drop money at? They drop money into the hands of Black people because they know Black people are going to go out to Walmart. We're going to go out to the mall. We're going to go out and spend that money. We're going to push that money into the economy. Imagine if we can take that money and bring it back into our own community, in the people's lives we can impact. And from just a criminal justice reform aspect of it, that's what Black Push is all about. We're actually getting ready to partner with a place called Powerhouse Enrichment Center now, where we're getting ready to open up a house for up to 10 men for a year program, where these men will be come out of prison, and they'll get the opportunity to actually have a job, to be able to learn different skills, to be able to learn different trades. If they want to start their own business, we're going to be assisting them with starting their own business. Because me and Ricky could probably speak to this more than anybody, is that when you walk outside that gate, you have to look at the world from a totally different perspective than you looked at it before you walked into that gate. And one of the things that I found too when I came out that gate is that the hardest community to accept me was the church community. It really was. It was the church community, which was the hardest community to accept me. And one of the things that we want to do, like I said, I'm in ministry just like that, Pastor Ramon, and just like Bishop Pastor Bryant. I do this every day. You don't know how many people I've buried this year due to COVID. You don't know how many funerals I've had to perform this year. But the reality is that we have to really get out here and hold people in leadership accountable. That's the first thing. But also, too, we have to have people in leadership that look like the community in which they serve. Absolutely. And that was so interesting that I love the state representative because she's really passionate about what she has going on. But you can tell that she is really out there representing the community in which she serves. And we got to make sure that we start putting people in power who represent the community that we serve. So that's something that I believe that's going to be really important. And I think that as a body and from a spiritual standpoint, from a church standpoint, we got to stop being so territorial, partner together, and we got to move this issue forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Smith, for your input on topic. So I want to kind of close with the voter suppression. I do want to talk about, thank you so much, Park Cannon, for your contributions. She has left, so it leaves us with whom we have currently. So we're going to split the remaining time to speak a little bit about voter suppression, especially was needed so much now. We're doing the runoff elections right now for the Senate. So I want to start with Pastor Jamal Bryant and speak a little bit about that.
Thank you. One of the sages of our community, Otis Moss II, one of the comrades and contemporaries of Dr. King, called me a couple of weeks ago and said, Reverend Bryant, what is happening in Georgia with this election? And I said, Dr. Moss, you're 81 years old. You're a veteran of the movement. I want to introduce you to a phrase you've never heard before. And he said, what is that? I said to him, white voter suppression. One of the best things that could ever happen to John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock is Donald Trump. Because what it is that they have planted has backfired, that the voting is fraudulent, which we know that it is not, that the votes are not being counted, but in rural areas, they're buying into the propaganda. And many of them, as a consequence, are not going to the polls. I'm really not concerned about DeKalb and Fulton County. It is the outliers that we've got to really synergize and get mobilized in these next 72 hours. And so the suppression that is taking place now, because all data is showing this has been the fairest and equitable election that we have had in recent history. The suppression we've got to now untangle ourselves from is the mental suppression that our vote doesn't count and that it won't make a difference and there'll be no impact. There is nobody having to count bubbles out of a soap dish. Nobody's having to memorize the Constitution. We just have to find the gumption enough to get to those polls on Tuesday and take that stand. I read a meme in the middle of the pandemic that said this. Here's what it said, Bishop Benton, is that our grandparents' greatest sacrifice was going to fight in the war. Our greatest sacrifice is having to stay home. And so now that you didn't participate in early voting or mail-in voting, I need you all to brave the elements, brave the pandemic, brave the COVID, and stand in line on Tuesday so that we're not in what Naeem Akbar calls psychological chains and images of slavery, but that we'll free ourselves to really make a difference, because really the whole westernized world is looking to see what Georgia's going to do on Tuesday.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your input, Pastor Bryant. It really spoke spoke volumes, and it's so important that we get all the people of our community out there to vote. I want to speak to Mr. Brown a little bit about your election and your campaign and what happened there, and then we're going to tie that into the current system, which voter suppression is taking place.
Okay. Well, you know, voter suppression is real. A lot of people don't believe it, but voter suppression is real, and it's real on both sides. When we talk about voter suppression, some of you may not know. After serving 13 years in federal prison, I was living in a community that I felt was being gentrified after running my business for that many years. So I decided I wanted to run for office. I ran for city council in District 3 here in the city of Atlanta in 2016 against the incumbent Ivory Young. I ran that race, got a lot of votes. People voted for me in the community. Somehow, somebody said, hey, he's an ex-offender. And they kicked me off the ballot. After voters, early voting had went on, got to that Monday, they kicked me off the ballot, took all my votes. And of course, you know, I took it on the chin and I wanted to know where are my rights? Why were my votes taken? And I was told that my votes were taken because I'm an ex-offender, and they did not know I was an ex-offender. I was also told that my crime, which was a drug crime, was a crime back in the 90s, was a crime of moral turpitude. And so I was kicked off the ballots, and my rights to run were suppressed. The people who voted for me, rights to vote for me were suppressed. And so there's got to be a change. I was able to get my rights back. The incumbent, as you know, Ivory Young passed a few months after being elected, and I was able to get my rights back. I went and I got my rights back. I got a full pardon, and I was able to get back on the ballot when the special election came. Even though I lost the race, and I wanted to encourage more men and women like me. I lost the race, but I won the fight, and that was my right to run. And I wanted to encourage other men and women that your vote does count. Let's take advantage of our vote. In the state of Georgia, if you're off parole and probation, you can vote. And that was one of the things I was arguing about. If I can vote, why can't I run for office? But that was suppressed. And but with the new law that's coming in, with the new criminal justice reform, hopefully all of those things will change. Men like me, just because our past, we don't want to allow our past to determine our future. And so I was trying to encourage other men and women, not only can you vote, but you can run for office. I was told that by me serving 13 years in prison, that I was the first person that served that much time that got on a political ballot in the country, black or white. I served 13 years off a 15-year sentence. So I just want to encourage men and women, no matter your past, get into the political process, be a part of the political process. Let's be a part of the change. Let's be a part of the future of our children and our community. So, you know, I took that opportunity to run for office to show men and women don't allow your past, because the true test of a man's character is his ability to overcome adversity. So I'm happy about it. And hopefully one day I'll get an opportunity to show somebody else that don't let your past determine your future. So I'm excited.
Very powerful, Mr. Brown. Thank you so much. And your success story, again, it speaks volumes. So I want to go ahead and switch the tune a little bit and ask Pastor Jamal. I'm going to ask Bishop Ramon his opinion on voter suppression.
Yes, voter suppression is a big thing right now. I'm in one of the toughest counties, Cobb County, getting people to vote for the offices of Senate. We had a meeting with Erica Thomas and them recently, us in the Pastors Alliance, talking about what we need to do to get people out to vote for this Senate, because many of our young people believe that it's not important. Their voice not important. My vote not going to count, and etc. So we made a declaration to really push this one, to swing the numbers. I think numbers in the last year, they said for the last Senate vote was low as 5% of the vote. Cobb County was so low. We really working hard right now to really do social media, get out, knock on doors, to make sure we voice it in our churches, in every avenue that we can to encourage our young people as well as everybody else that is so important for them to understand in their local, that it's important for them to vote on the Senate. And the numbers have really changed a lot, especially Cobb County. If you know, Cobb County is one of the toughest counties, you know, and I heard Pastor Jamal talk a lot about over in that area with poverty and all. And I tell you, it's the poverty over there, but it's a swing of the race. And people have been feeling for years that their voice in Cobb County is not important to be heard and that their vote is making a difference. But I beg to differ. And I've been encouraging young people, my family, all over that listen to me, because I do a lot with the high schools with sports, and plus I own a restaurant in Cobb County. And I do my best to encourage them. Everybody I come into contact with, it's very important for you to get out there and vote. I pushed a lot of people to do my best to get them vote. And of course, I just did my early voting, and Minister Shaun Smith was on me about that. Look, I need you and First Lady to get out there and get y'all voting. Of course, we got it in yesterday morning. I'm sorry, on the 30th, we got it in. So I encourage people to really understand we have got to vote, and your voice does make a difference. Your vote makes all the difference.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Ramon. And then I'm going to end with the last commentary from Mr. Shaun Smith.
First off, I just want to say that, you know, the reason why we named this town hall today to be Voice for the Voiceless is Martin Luther King had a very famous quote. Martin Luther King said, "Give us the ballot and we'll place judges on the benches of the South and who will do justly and love mercy." He said, "Give us a ballot and we'll quietly and non-violently, without rancor or bitterness, implement the Supreme Court's decision," right? And this is the thing that's so important. You know, one of the things I think about the state of Florida recently, 2 years ago, passed a law that finally caught up with the rest of the state, with the rest of the world, basically saying once a person has served their time, they should have the right to have their rights restored back. And I think about it from the perspective of actually, like, once again, being an ex-offender and being on the other side of that counter, when the judge can look at you and know that they can put you away for 2 years and know that on top of the 2 years, if they add 5 years probation to that, that by the time you get done doing all that and paying your fees, and then your state makes you wait forever, 5 years, another 5 years in order to get your rights restored. If they know that they can keep you silent for 12 years, they know that more than likely they won't be there in 12 years when it's time to run for an election. If you want to give people a voice, if you want a voice in this society, Martin Luther King said it best, if you want a voice, you got to have a vote, period. And one of the things that I think too, like everybody has said here, man, we Georgia right now has a real opportunity to show the world. You know, it's crazy because when I caught COVID, I started getting out. I was on 11 Live, Fox 5, because I had caught COVID twice, and I started getting these people from other countries who were reaching out to me in reference to doing interviews. And one of the countries that reached out to me was a Belgian newspaper and a Belgian morning show. And it was interesting on how caught up they were in what was going on in Georgia and Belgium, because they understand that what we do here is not only going to implement this country, but what we do here is going to implement the world. What we do here and what we're doing here. And it's not just with the Senate election, like Pastor Jamal Bryant said, it's not just the Senate election. Man, we got local officials. We need more representatives like State Representative Hart Cannon. One of the things that I find interesting about her, and I love so much about her story, is that most people don't know that when she first came in office, she was the youngest elected official, state representative at the time, at the age of 24. We need more people like that. And Pastor Jamal Bryant brought up another good point. You know, everybody says that they're scared of going out and voting. They're scared. They're worried about COVID. But hey, you know, where was your fear when you were out there marching for George Floyd rightfully, right? Where was the fear then? If we can do that, if we can go to a grocery store, if we can get up every morning and go to work, we can get out there and stand in that line and vote, because the only way we're going to have a voice, the only way we're going to change the dynamic, the only way we're going to start moving generational wealth, the only way we're going to make our leaders look like our community is we have to not only vote in the presidential election and the special election, we have to vote when we're voting for county commissioner, for city commissioner, for mayor. These are the elections for sheriff. You know, one of the things that Pastor Ramon, I know for a fact he's been working hard on, is that we've worked hard in Cobb County to get a Black sheriff. A couple of years ago, we worked hard in Douglas County to get a Black sheriff, right? We have to change that dynamic. We have to start making our counties, our city, our state look like the people in which they represent. And we have a role to do with that from the standpoint of from the church, to all the way down to the jailhouse, we have a role to do, because we have to also start educating them while they're in jail of the importance to vote and what their rights are when they get out. Because one of the big things too is that a lot of people don't. I'm going to share this story, then I'm going to end. My mom does a lot of political work down in Florida. She is, if you want a person to run your absentee campaign ballots, my mom is the person in Broward County, right? And two, I say this too, Pastor Jamal, Bryant, me and you actually share a mentor in favor. I was actually a member of Dr. Matt King Carter Church when he was the pastor of Mount Olive Baptist Church. So I know him very well. But when my mom was down there, my mom went and voted in the first election, and she was able to vote for Barack Obama for president in the first election. She worked on the second election. She was working for a local candidate, and Barack Obama was running for re-election. My mom has a picture of herself standing next to President Barack Obama on the shirt. When she went to go vote, they threw out her vote because they said she was ineligible because of a crime that she had committed over 30 years ago. And after the election, they sent her a letter and said, oh, we made a mistake. You were eligible to vote. We have to let people know that at a certain point, yes, you may have messed up, but you still have a right to get your rights restored. Go and get your pardon, go and request those things from the state, and let them, and give them the resources, and give them a place that they can go where they know that they can get help and make sure those things are done. Because once again, if a person gets a voice in this society, they can change this whole nation. Give them a voice, give them a vote.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your input on that, Mr. Smith. Thank you, guys. I want to thank all my viewers and thank everybody who tuned in to view this. I want to thank all the participants as well. So I asked the participants, stay on just a little bit longer. We're going to go ahead and get the live off, and then we're going to kind of discuss a little bit about some particulars.